The community of Stonebrook Trails was a fortress of enforced mediocrity, a place where the greatest criminal offense was a lawn that wasn't perfectly emerald green or a trash can left visible past 7 p.m. Its residents lived under the constant scrutiny of a paramilitary-style organization that called itself the Stonebrook Enforcement Corps, but was known to everyone else, with derision, as the HOA police. These volunteers, led by a man named Commander Thorne, wore tacky, custom-made uniforms, complete with cheap badges and tactical vests, and drove around in a repurposed, dark-colored sedan plastered with official-looking decals. Their self-granted mission was to patrol the streets, issuing warnings and fines for every infraction, leveraging the sheer, unjustified intimidation factor of their faux authority. Daniel, a resident who maintained a quiet, low profile, had clashed with them before over things as mundane as unapproved shrubbery, but today, the situation was accelerating into the realm of the truly absurd. Daniel was pulling into his own driveway after a late run to the gym when the Enforcement Corps car screeched to a halt behind him, blocking the street. Commander Thorne, a man whose physique suggested more time spent yelling than exercising, burst out of the driver's seat, followed by his partner, a nervous woman who clutched a thick binder like a shield. Thorne approached Daniel's vehicle with the stiff-legged gait of a police officer in a bad movie, his face set in an expression of self-serious indignation. Daniel rolled down his window, suppressing a sigh. "Can I help you?" Commander Daniel asked, his tone deliberately level, professional, and entirely unconcerned. Thorne didn't respond to the question. Instead, he brandished a piece of paper, a crudely printed, official-looking document with the Stonebrook Trails logo embossed in gold. "Mr. Vance," Thorne announced, his voice booming slightly, clearly intended for the benefit of any nearby neighbors. "You are hereby served with an official summons for repeated non-compliance and defiance of the Stonebrook covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Specifically, Section 9.2.a, failure to maintain consistent exterior paint tone after written warning." Daniel blinked, recalling the minor chip on his fascia he had promised to repaint the following weekend. "That's a civil matter, Thorne. I'll get to it." Thorne puffed out his chest, stepping even closer to Daniel's window. "It has now escalated, sir. You have accrued over $3,000 in outstanding fines, constituting a clear and persistent threat to the financial stability of the community. Therefore, the Stonebrook Enforcement Corps has obtained a warrant of arrest authorized by the Board of Governors." Thorne presented the paper with a flourish. The warrant was a laughably inept document, it had no judge's signature, no court seal, and was signed in messy script by B. Williams, Chair, Judicial Subcommittee. "You are under arrest, Mr. Vance," Thorne declared, reaching a heavy hand toward Daniel's door handle. "You will exit the vehicle slowly, place your hands on the roof, and submit to detention pending payment of your outstanding balance." Daniel felt a cold wave of disbelief, quickly replaced by a sharp, focused calm. This was beyond the petty, this was bordering on criminal activity. The HOA cops were attempting to perform an illegal detainment, an act of false imprisonment, based on a bogus document and a paint chip. Daniel had spent his career dealing with actual warrants, actual arrests, and actual criminals, and the sheer audacity of this imitation was staggering. "Thorne, pull your hand away from my car," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a low, intense register that carried more authority than Thorne's entire uniform. "You are not a police officer. You do not have the power of arrest. That piece of paper is a civil notice, at best. If you touch me or my vehicle, you are committing a felony, and your little game ends right here." Thorne, mistaking the warning for typical resident resistance, escalated further, his face turning red with frustration. "Do not resist, Mr. Vance. This is a legal detention. The board has empowered us. We will use reasonable force to compel compliance." Thorne's partner, the nervous woman, mumbled something about calling the police for assistance. Daniel knew the charade had to stop immediately, before Thorne actually laid hands on him. His training, his entire professional life, demanded an immediate, nonviolent application of superior, genuine authority. He looked directly into Thorne's eyes, seeing only the vacant certainty of someone high on misplaced power. He realized Thorne had absolutely no idea who he was dealing with, a fact Daniel had always kept carefully hidden from his HOA files to maintain his privacy and his sanity. He briefly considered calling the real police on his phone, but that would simply delay the confrontation. No, the time for the big reveal, the definitive application of superior institutional force, had arrived. He just needed to reach into his own jacket, access the one item that would instantly turn Thorne's face from smug arrogance to utter, total terror. The time for the real badge to make its appearance was now. Commander Thorne, oblivious to the chasm of legal and professional authority separating him from the man in the car, tightened his grip on the door handle. His eyes were wide with the thrill of the confrontation, convinced that he was finally asserting the true power of the Stonebrook Enforcement Corps. "Final warning, Mr. Vance. Compliance is mandatory," he barked, pulling the handle firmly. Daniel didn't resist the pull. Instead, he initiated his own, devastatingly simple maneuver. He didn't rush, didn't shout, or engage in a physical struggle. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and saturated with an undeniable, quiet weight of genuine institutional power that contrasted sharply with Thorne's flimsy, store-bought uniform. Reaching slowly inside his lightweight gym jacket, Daniel ignored Thorne's continued bluster. His fingers closed around the familiar, hard leather case. He pulled it out and, with a crisp, audible snap, flipped open the heavy, bifold ID wallet. The sunlight caught the shield, a heavy, solid piece of metal reflecting official state authority, not the cheap, tinny badge pinned to Thorne's tactical vest. Centered on the identification side was his photograph, and beneath it, clearly legible, were the words, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Thorne's hand, still gripping the door handle, went slack. His jaw dropped. His eyes, darting from the glittering shield to the photo ID, then back to Daniel's calm, impassive face, registered a terror so profound it seemed to physically deflate his puffed-up posture. The silence that followed the snap of the wallet was deafening, a vacuum where Thorne's loud, petty aggression had been moments before. The nervous partner, who had been dialing the local police on her cell phone, froze, listening to the collective intake of breath from the neighbors now openly watching the scene. Daniel, finally speaking with his true professional voice, leaned closer to the open window. His tone was low, precise, and infinitely more menacing than Thorne's shouting. "Let me be very clear, Commander Thorne," Daniel stated, using the ridiculous title one last time. "That document you are waving is a fabricated piece of garbage. That uniform and that badge are a violation of federal and state statutes concerning impersonating a law enforcement officer. And that arrest you just attempted is false imprisonment and unlawful detention of a federal agent. I have been reporting to the FBI for 17 years. What exactly were your credentials before you bought that vest?" Thorne's face, which moments ago had been red with arrogance, paled to an ashen gray. He began to stammer, a broken sound coming from his throat. I didn't. Mr. Vance. I mean. Agent Vance, it's just the community. He couldn't form a coherent sentence. His entire reality, the one where his fake uniform gave him the power to seize property and detain residents, had been irrevocably shattered by one piece of ID. The partner, recognizing the immediate and catastrophic legal danger, quietly began to back away toward their vehicle, subtly trying to peel the magnetic enforcement core decals off the side of the car. Daniel fixed his stare back on Thorne. "You are to step back from my vehicle immediately. You are not to touch me or this car again. Furthermore, you will stay put and wait for the actual police, the ones with legitimate jurisdiction, to arrive. Do you understand the instructions?" Thorne nodded frantically, his head bobbing like a startled puppet. His hands were shaking so badly that the fake warrant of arrest fluttered out of his grasp and drifted into the gutter. He took 2 shaky steps back, the stiffness gone from his posture, replaced by the universal stance of a man facing genuine, life-altering consequences. Daniel then reached for his own communication device, a secure, advanced radio unlike any local police or community organization possessed. He pressed the transmit button, the distinct static of a secured federal channel cutting sharply through the suburban quiet. "Control, this is Agent Vance, call sign Alpha 7. I am 10 to 5 in contact at my residence, 123 Pinecrest Lane. Requesting local Leo support for a situation involving unlawful detention and impersonation of an officer. Suspects detained on site. Advise local precinct that this is an immediate, nonviolent federal matter requiring custody transfer." The sound of the secured federal channel and the use of specialized 10 codes was the final, total obliteration of the HOA police's authority. The neighbors, watching from their windows, suddenly understood that the quiet man who argued about shrubbery was not just arguing about shrubbery. He was a man who commanded a level of institutional power that could erase the entire HOA in a single phone call. Thorne, hearing the word federal and realizing his petty harassment was about to land him in a very different type of jail, simply dropped his clipboard and slumped against the side of the HOA-marked golf cart, every ounce of his borrowed authority gone, replaced by the raw, cold fear of a man who had criminally provoked the wrong target. The confrontation was over, the consequences were about to begin. The moment Agent Daniel Vance spoke into his secured federal radio, the absurd conflict was elevated from a local nuisance to a serious legal matter, triggering a rapid response that the Stonebrook Enforcement Corps was wholly unprepared to handle. Within 15 minutes, 2 local patrol cars arrived, followed closely by an unmarked vehicle containing a supervisor. The local police, recognizing the FBI signal and the rank of the agent involved, acted with immediate and respectful caution. Commander Thorne and his partner, who had been standing in shell-shock silence, were quickly taken into custody. The flimsy nature of their badges and the homemade warrant provided immediate, clear evidence of their felony violation, impersonating an officer. Daniel provided a concise, professional summary to the local police supervisor. He detailed the attempted detention, the fabricated warrant, and the clear intent to use intimidation to enforce civil financial penalties. He handed over the crumpled, bogus warrant and Thorne's cheap, unauthorized badge. The local police immediately agreed to hold Thorne and his partner pending further investigation by federal authorities, as the impersonation of any law enforcement officer, even locally, was a serious crime the local precinct was eager to dismantle. The immediate disbandment of the HOA police was non-negotiable, and the HOA's repurposed sedan, deemed an illegally marked vehicle, was impounded as evidence. The neighborhood watched in stunned silence as the emblems of their local tyranny were towed away. The true, devastating impact of the incident unfolded the following day. The FBI, viewing the use of pseudo-official uniforms and documents to falsely imprison a U.S. citizen, let alone a federal agent, as a dangerous precedent, did not treat the matter lightly. The case was assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Commander Thorne and his partner faced formal charges that went far beyond local misdemeanors. They were charged with attempted false imprisonment and impersonation of a federal officer even though they only claimed to be HOA police. Their tactics and gear clearly crossed the line into misrepresentation of police power. The severity of the federal charges immediately stripped the HOA of any legal standing to support them. No insurance policy would cover criminal acts of this magnitude. The fallout decimated the entire HOA structure. The remaining Board of Governors convened an emergency, frantic meeting, now acutely aware that their years of petty tyranny were founded on legally baseless intimidation. Faced with massive civil liability lawsuits from Daniel, criminal exposure for having authorized the Enforcement Corps, and the public humiliation of their leaders facing federal charges, the board crumbled. Their first act was to issue a formal, humiliating public apology to Daniel, printed on official letterhead, admitting their gross error and lack of authority. Their second act, executed under duress, was the permanent and total dissolution of the Stonebrook Enforcement Corps, with every scrap of uniform and equipment ordered destroyed. Daniel, using his professional leverage and clear legal high ground, dictated the terms of the final resolution. He didn't seek financial gain for himself, he sought systemic reform. He demanded that the HOA's legal counsel draft a permanent amendment to the CCRs, explicitly barring any future community organization from using terms like police, enforcement, warrant, or arrest, and strictly limiting fines and compliance to civil court proceedings, stripping away all coercive authority. He also insisted that all outstanding fines levied by Thorne and the Corps be immediately waived and refunded. The board, desperate to avoid a ruinous class action lawsuit from Daniel and other similarly harassed residents, complied with every demand. The climax of the story wasn't a shouting match or a physical struggle, it was the quiet, overwhelming force of the American justice system deployed against petty, fabricated power. Commander Thorne, the man who dreamed of being a neighborhood sheriff, ultimately pleaded guilty to lesser federal charges, agreeing to serve a brief but impactful period of home confinement and several years of strict probation, which included a court order permanently banning him from serving in any HOA leadership capacity. His attempts at intimidation resulted in the total loss of his reputation and his freedom. Daniel's final act was returning to his quiet routine. His driveway was clear. The ridiculous Enforcement Corps car was gone, replaced by the mundane presence of a local mail carrier. The neighborhood was quiet, liberated from the daily threat of the fake police. The lesson was etched into the community's consciousness: while petty rules might govern the height of their lawns, true authority rests only with the law, and there is no room for amateur, weaponized imitation in civil society. Daniel, the man who wanted nothing more than a quiet life, had inadvertently become the instrument of institutional purification, using his FBI credentials not to make an arrest, but to permanently disband a tyranny.